This is the Fuel Your Life podcast where we help you find, unleash, elevate your leadership in order to create a loving, impactful, freeing energy within you and around you. And now for your hosts, John Troutman and Charles Draper. And good morning. Welcome back. This is Fuel Your Life with John Troutman and Charles Draper. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. And you?
I'm doing great. Well, I say that, and we've just talked about how we're both sitting here like, okay, we got to get focused and get some energy. So I think we are doing well, but we're dragging this morning a little bit. So we're about to pick it up, about to grab some energy from somewhere.
So how's your week been going?
Dude, it's been okay. I was telling you a second ago, but it's just a really busy week for us. We have our end of the year banquet for our ministry, which is one of the bigger events for us, and one of those events that it's not even that it takes so much energy, but I want to do it really well this year. I want to send our seniors off well, and this is one of those times where the value of focus is really significant within this event. And because it's not just hey, let's have fun, celebrate the year. We really want this to be a time where we're sending off our seniors and sending them out. So we want to not only recognize them and celebrate them, but we want to make the space to really, in some ways, ground what's happened over the last, most of them are 3-4 years at this point, within them, so that they can continue to flourish as they get to be part of the community wherever they go now. So yeah, it's been interesting trying to get that together, and then having several other things going on. So it's that week.
Yeah.
But it's been good.
So how do y'all normally, I guess a banquet of sorts that you guys will be having, that y'all are trying to just organize and construct and kind of capture their time in your campus ministry? Is that kind of the essence of what you're planning and pulling together?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, we have a nice dinner, and this is one of those times where we make it a point to take communion together. And so we kind of bring everybody together. We want to harness that, I say spiritual element. I don't like the word spiritual because we move it out from the rest of our lives, but it's an integral part in all of our lives. I'll digress on that. So yeah, we bring in that element of just the worship through communion and having a meal together. But then, this is our time. I mean, this is the marking of the end of a career for several of our seniors, as well as kind of the end of the year. And so it's the time to take what's happened from August through now, which is April, and we're moving into May, and to kind of bring it all together so that we can actually use that to build on as a ministry next year. So it's integral in that sense of we're solidifying everything that's happened over the last 7-8 months. We're helping ground it. We're putting vocabulary to it. We're, in some ways, we're just helping our students start realizing, like, oh yeah, this is more than just what's happened in me. Our community has changed, and our community has shifted in this way. And we're trying to help solidify that so that, well, 2 reasons. One is those that are leaving, when we're sending them out, I mean, they're not coming back to us, for one, but we want to send them out. The whole goal from the beginning has been that they would be sent out as followers of Christ for 5-10 years after, I mean, forever after, but especially the next 5 or 10 years. And so we want to actually celebrate that moment of sending them out. And for our students that are going to be returning, the summer's the hardest part most of the time, especially for those who are just going to be going home. And not doing other neat things. And when they go home, it's usually a pretty stagnant period. And so if we can just help them start reflecting on what God's been doing for 7, 8 months on a bigger picture than just, hey, what's happened to me, then it helps them kind of have their foundation even throughout the summer months to help come back, so we have something to build on moving into next year as a community. So you know, it's a lot of reflection that for me, because that's my role in this, is really making sure the reflection piece happens, making sure doing the speeches and all that, honoring the students and those things, which is the fun part. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm working on, is trying to make sure all that comes together well.
I got you. So, you know, obviously, like, the kids aren't graduating. You said that the summer months are sometimes the hardest. Um, what do you see? I'm just kind of curious what you've seen over the past couple of years. Um, Whenever kids come back from the summer, kids that maybe have had um, I don't know, haven't fallen off from their habits of, whether it's being in studying the word or following the Lord. Like, what kind of habits do those kids put in place over the summer to kind of, I guess, stay on track or to just continue that relationship? Like, do you have any insight in that, or recommendations that you give them as they go out during the summer months? Just curious what you
Oh yeah.
see, or trends that you see.
Yeah. There's a couple pieces that I think are integral in the college experience, especially. But the first thing that I recommend all the time is never go home for the summer. Um, and parents hate hearing that from campus ministers, but often it's one of the worst things that a college student can do, because you're going back to a space where honestly you were kind of a different person at that point in your life, when you were at home, when you lived at home during high school. And then when you go back to that space, you're kind of falling back into who you used to be. And college has a unique opportunity where you have summers available to do some really awesome stuff through the summer. And to utilize that summer is huge, because the more experiences you can have, the more well-rounded you are as a person and a human being, but also the more you learn to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. So that's kind of a bigger thing, but I highly recommend, and I'm talking to my students about this starting in usually February, of, listen, do something awesome with your summer. Do something awesome with your summer. Don't just go home. Most of them don't listen still. Most of them still end up at home. Um, but that's one of the biggest things. You're naturally surrounding yourself with other people um, who are just, they're pushing themselves. They're stretching their comfort zones. They're learning to do new things when you do awesome experiences in the summer. And I just said the second thing, which is, more than anything else, it's who you surround yourself with. Even the students who go home, but they're going to be home and they're going to be building that consistency, and they're going to show back up with some, we'll call it fire, show back up with some fire in them. Those are people who, when they go home, they still have a group around them that they're able to hang out with outside of their family. Or they have a really, really good family life, a family structure that promotes just this idea of really being connected and developing habits as a family that I think help them sustain themselves. But it's who you're around more than anything else. I mean, I'm a Bible nerd. I love the Bible. I think it's the most interesting collection of books ever written. And I think it's because there's a pretty awesome God behind it. And by pretty awesome, I mean really awesome. But you just go home and students that, oh, I'm going to read the Bible every day, it usually doesn't happen. And even if it does, they still struggle when they're kind of in that environment. So I think summers, looking from my perspective and looking at summers, you realize how much the environment and the community matters. And those are the two things that'll shape a summer and prepare you for moving into the fall and starting back over. So
I know, in
those are good
college,
questions.
no, I mean, I remember summers, I had summers that were great and summers that weren't. And, I took some trips during some summers, and those were wonderful at times. And just that community. Just as I look back, I mean, um, going home during the summer, we really weren't part of a like I didn't have, I guess, a church fellowship that I was part of, and I wish I would have sought that out a little bit more, but I wasn't as much on my radar as the others, and I was all over the place, so that was more inconsistent. I was just curious from your perspective. So cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, looking back at your summers, I mean, what do you think you valued most in those summers?
No, well, I just think college is such an interesting time because you, some kids are working money, so that drove a lot of that. Some kids don't have to. I think especially now, a lot of kids probably don't work, and that's just my perspective. I could be wrong about that. I probably am. So anyway, but you have all those perspectives, right? So some kids are like, hey, I got a grinder in the summer, so I can make money, pay bills, A, B, C, and D. Um, so no, so my summers, I mean, so I still had to work, so I had to figure that piece out. But I took some pretty neat trips. Went to Cambodia one summer and a couple different mission trip type deals. Spent some summers working in some different places like the Outer Banks and working with some framing crews and just kind of grinding in that sense. And nah, I mean, I always enjoyed them. I just knew that I was disconnected from my Christian brothers and sisters that would either hold me accountable or whatnot. So there was more space there, and the proximity wasn't as close. So I would tend to, as far as spiritually goes, just struggle a little bit in my walk. But then other summers I didn't. So I just think it is a unique time for those kids. They can embrace it and can have a great time. And really, they won't ever have another summer like what they have during college. And we know that. And we look back and, we realize that, once you get out into the real world, you don't have a summer where you get to take off and, not have the responsibilities that school would bring. So yeah, I just, hold on.
Yeah. No, I think you're saying often a lot of the same things, which we had similar experiences with our summers. But I look back and I went home one summer in my college career. Um, and that was, I still regret in some ways just going home for that summer when there was just so many opportunities to go do some different things.
Yeah.
Um, I say regret. I mean, I love my family and I don't regret it. It was a valuable learning tool. Um, but then every other summer I was able to do something that was a little bit different. So it just, you know, utilizing that space in college is very significant. And and I mean, you said it, but the value of not only the experience, but the value of the community that you can create in those times, um, it just, oh, so I spent a summer in Yellowstone before our last year of college, which was probably the most formative summer I had. Um, but it was a totally different experience, stepping out of my comfort zone, and building an awesome community. We did it with a ministry called a Christian Ministry in the National Parks. But the community we built and the experience, I think, led to, the formation that happened. And my wife did it as well, but we weren't on the same team. So we saw each other very little throughout the summer. We weren't dating or anything at that point, but she had a totally different experience, still very formative. Um, and just it's anyways, I'll digress, but the point I'm trying to make is the value of community. We both hit on it. Now that you're out of college and you are in the place you are with a family, 3 kids, and what do you look for in a community? Yeah, what do you look for in a community?
Well, you know, as far as what do I look for, I guess I'll more so talk about just how we found community. Um, and I say that because, I mean, I'm not sitting, I mean, I'm part of that and it's built and it grows, but I mean, you kind of find your community in a sense. I think whenever we were newlyweds, we were looking for similar people in similar walks of life, newlyweds. Not necessarily people with kids, that wasn't what we were looking for because we weren't going through that at the moment in that time. And then that shifted once we had kids. We want to be around people that had kids. And so just people in similar stages of life. I think you typically gravitate towards that. But really look for people that have the same values and the same core beliefs. Especially, right now, like with my kids, I want to make sure that people we're hanging around, they're kind of, we're similar in the sense of the things we believe and what we stand for and those kind of things. So, that's super important in community. It was hard. It's been hard to find that. We've been blessed here over the past couple of years, just we ended up moving, to a different county and, which is closer to the school that I work at right now. And, we found a community in Evelyn's ball team, people that we are around, but then also in our church. We hunted for a church for a couple of years and we were at a church for a while. And for whatever reasons, we decided to start looking for another one. And it took about 2 years to land and find a church. And we love our church community too. So, I mean, all those things are super important. But I do think, I mean, in both those spaces where my communities are tightest. And then at work, we have our communities. The things you're passionate about are similar, your beliefs are similar. Doesn't mean that all your strengths are similar, right? Like, there's people that are great at doing different things within that community. I'll say too, even at church, just having diversity amongst age, people that have had lots of life experiences and, so I don't know, I don't know, that's kind of a big question, but I think at the end of the day, it's, you look for people that are moving in the same space as you and believe the same things as you, or at least your core values, what you stand for, as far as, and, if I started hanging around people that, went out and robbed banks all the time, that's probably not going to be, we don't have an excess of bank robbers, but I'll just give that a,
Unless they're really good at it, and then
well, and even
yeah, I'm
then,
just saying.
like, just, but just that's not going to draw me into it, right? Like,
Right.
there's
Yeah.
communities of people that, do all kinds of things, play flag football or that, pickleball. I just, group of people that have reached out to me are avid pickleballers, or
Oh.
however you would say that, but they play pickleball out. They want to use my gym. And I haven't reached back out to them yet, but that's a community, but they love doing that and they get in that space and they go and they play pickleball and that's something that they enjoy. And I'm sure they have a community of people around it, but that's not my jam. I don't know much about pickleball. So, I think of all the different communities that we have just within our town and our county. You're drawn to people that have similar likes and interests, and then it goes from there.
Yeah. I Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly as I think about that, of you are typically you gravitate to people who have that similar life experience at that time. Um, and I don't know if I wanna, well, I want to go this direction because a lot of my role in thinking often is, hey, how do we bring people into our community? Yes, it's an invitation, but there's also this reality of what's going to what's going to actually invite people in when we look at it. I think about this all the time with CCF, but this is the way my brain works. I don't care where I am. If I mean, just we were talking about my oldest is playing t-ball. If I'm at a t-ball game and I see one, um, which I'm actually usually this parent, but one parent sitting off by themselves, I want to figure out how to bring them in to make them feel part of the team, or something like that. And so, what does it look like, when you talk about finding community, but as you become part of the community, how do you help shape that community to have the mentality of, hey, we want to bring people in?
Yeah. Um, well, I honestly, I think people get brought in because they see what's going on, right? And they want to be part
Hmm.
of it. I can invite you all day long. I can go out and if somebody looks lonely in a store, go talk, hey, why don't you come? And um, honestly, sometimes just extending the invitation, people will show up, right? Um, but just I think naturally people hearing about what's going on and just talking about it and sharing about it. We're both part of an F3 group, right? And it's a men's leadership slash workout group. A lot of different things. We could talk about that for a while, but I'm not as connected with that right now. But whenever I was more connected with it, I talked about it all the time. Yeah, so hey, and I found opportunities for men that, they were looking to grow as a leader or looking to get more fit. And I'd say, hey, listen, like I've heard about this. Let me tell you a little bit more. So just inviting people, telling people about it, um, sharing what it's done in your life. I think testimonial, just sharing stories. It's one thing for me to say, hey, come to this. It's great, but it's another thing to say, hey, come to this, and then share an experience like CCF, for example. There's a young lady that's actually coming up to ASU starting next year, and I just heard about it Sunday, and I'm gonna make a point over the next couple of weeks to talk to her about, hey, check out Campus Christian Fellowship. Check out CCF whenever you get up there. But I'm not just gonna tell
And I
you.
would,
But
I'm going to
but
interject on that
but I mean,
because,
well, just I know what you're gonna say. Go to a campus ministry or get plugged in, maybe. But I don't know.
well, no, I was going to say get her connected beforehand because it's so
Yeah,
much easier to show up for students these days.
yeah.
Um, and so you have a pretty good connection to campus ministries and at App
Yeah,
for
yeah,
me.
I
Yeah.
know a guy. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but
So we should,
it's
we should
different.
talk.
It's different with me saying, "Hey, this is great," instead of saying, "Hey, like, let me tell you how this changed my life."
Mhm. Yeah.
And then kind of people perk up. Like, oh, changed your life, like it was life changing. And then you go down that path. So I mean, just sharing stories and just inviting them, and then being consistent with that invitation, not just forgetting about them. And I don't know. I think as you build that, as you invite people in, really the whoever's leading and whoever people look up to within that space, um, their mentality will, I believe, bleed over into the group. For instance, like if you have a pastor that he, you know, pastors and churches, they all kind of have different, I think, flavors or different. Some are very mission minded, some are very giving minded, some are very service oriented, and but it comes off by what is the pastor of the church passionate about, and I believe that bleeds over into the congregation. Or the pastors or the leadership, what are they most passionate about? So I don't know. I think I really think just being in tune with others, wanting others to come in. I think there's some groups that they get a certain size, or they get to be a certain whatever, and they think this is good enough. We got our space, we got our people, and they don't want it to grow. So I think there also needs to be that want for that community to grow. If you got a flag football team and you can only have 7 on the team, and you got your 7, and that's the 7 you want, you're probably not going to invite a bunch of people to come be on your flag football team because you've met your quota of people. So your team limit's there, so you're not going to be looking. If somebody leaves, and guess what? Everybody's going to hardcore start looking for that next stud to fill that gap. And once they fill it, they're going to just kind of maintain. I think a lot of it just depends on where that group wants to go.
Yeah, I I agree. I actually really like you talking about sharing your stories and your connection. I was talking to a good friend of ours, Ed Ponton, the other day. He was up here. He actually brought up when he was in South Africa, one thing he noticed was and you may remember this, but they would always say something like testify, instead of like, hey, what's your testimony? They would ask you to testify. Kind of the same idea, but it struck at a little bit because it's, when we say testimony, we usually like, oh, in the Christian world, it's share your experience of how you started following Jesus, how you got saved. And you and I both know that that's not really what a testimony is. All a testimony is a story of how God has worked, period. How has God worked? But to use the term testify, the whole point is like that's a very present verb. And so it's not just, oh, this is what God did, that was almost 20 years ago for me at this point. This is what God did 20 years ago. No, this is what God has done and continues to do. This is what he's done in the past week. This is what he's done today. Being able to share those stories and interact. And I bring that up just in that same sense of stories. Our personal stories are much more likely to invite people into whatever we're excited about, whatever community we're excited about. And the other thing is excitement. Our energy, the way we show up and the way we talk about things, makes a huge difference of like, oh, okay, I'll try it out. But if you're wanting to bring people in, I think of F3 actually as a great example because you told me about F3, but you're in a different area. You're about an hour away from me. And you were a part of it for a long time. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Sounds great. And you kept saying, yeah, I think there's a group in Boone. You should go check it out. And I'm like, yeah. But my neighbor, who's, got involved with F3, I was surprised to hear him get involved. And he's like, dude, I've got this group. You should come check it out with me. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, yeah, he's going to be there. It's a personal invitation. And so that's why I got plugged in. So it's, I don't know. Those are things that I think about all the time is, man, how do we bring people in? How do we bring people in? But it's not as difficult as we often make it. Share your story. Be excited.
Yeah. Do you, question for you, do you feel like, and I guess I've heard people say this, that, this generation coming up, they're not as relational. I've heard that comment a couple times over the past month. And, I don't know, thoughts on that. And if so, why you think that is? Yeah.
Oh boy. I love talking about this upcoming generation because I think there are many, many, many misnomers about this generation that are, yeah, they're generally true, you could say. But often, if you really get to know them, they are, I mean, they're hungry for life in many ways. But to answer your question, they are more, the way I would say it is they're more inclined to isolation. It's not that they're actually less relational, it's that they have more opportunity, and their um, part of their framework is that, oh, they can just go and be isolated, and that's okay. And I think from my
Wow.
perspective, a lot of the reason why that's happened,
Yeah.
um, there's a couple reasons. One's COVID. I mean, from a just societal perspective, whenever you're told, hey, there's this sickness out there, you need to just go basically curl up in your bedroom and not come out. It's just not a good thing from a societal perspective. Now they're much more inclined to retreat to their room. Their thinking is that, oh, the smallest space that I can have, my, room or home, this is my only safe place now. Even places like going to school all of a sudden wasn't safe. All these things that they always considered safe spaces are no longer those places. Church wasn't safe anymore. I mean, you go on and on and on. And so that's a big piece of it. We're still feeling the effects of that. Um, the other thing is personal devices and laptops. It's not even that they are less relational. It's how they interact. And this generation, I think one thing we have to start realizing as a little bit older of a generation is they interact through screens. And personally, I don't think that's a good thing, but I think we have to make that recognition of they interact through screens. So either, depending on the position you're in, you have to figure out how to use a screen to interact with them initially, or you have to make the space so that screens are not available. And I think we kind of want to, that's just how they've grown up. And so we kind of want to talk down on this generation, but this generation, through the formative years of their lives, they have had screens in front of them, and they've been told by their friends, like, hey, this is how you interact with me. And so why would they think anything different? This is exactly what they've been doing. And I mean, what happens in the brain over and over and over again is they're being told, oh, this is what I need. This is what I need, in the brain. So I struggle to call them less relational. They just relate differently. And I think and what I have found by doing this with this generation is when you invite them into something different, it's actually really freeing for them. But most of their families, they grew up seeing their parents, they're on screens all the time. They grew up seeing their grandparents at this point who are on screens all the time. I mean, it's like we not only need to set the example, but we need to recognize the value of space to just be with people. So yeah, I struggle with calling them less relational, but it does seem that way. And they are more inclined to isolation, and they've been told they can do that. They have the freedom to do that, and they interact differently. But I struggle to say they're less relational because they want it. They want relationships and they want to be close. They really just don't know how.
Cool. Well, I mean, just a thought I want to throw out there. I know you, I mean, I see elementary kids all the day, all day long, and school age kids, and I mean, I don't get the feeling that they're less relational. I just it depends on where you connect with them, and a device or a screen can stonewall that, and that's what they're meant to do. That's what they're built for. That's what all the apps are geared towards, to make you want to come back, to make you want to be in that space longer, to make you. I mean, they're geared to. I mean, the longer you're on it, the more advertising that they can get, the more clickbait, all the things. So, I mean, they're creating that
Hmm.
space. But the beautiful thing whenever you're on a ball field or whenever you're out, playing out at recess, those kind of things. There's no screens, and then you see kids
Hmm.
moving and having a good time, being kids, just like we were. So, got to create that
Yep.
space more often.
Yep. I think that's the biggest challenge for us. As parents, the biggest challenge for us as people who are interacting with other generations, that they have so much access to screens, in different ways. The biggest challenge for us is to be able to, make that space and make it fun. And I said it's a challenge because, the what screens do, and it's constant. Like you're all of a sudden. I mean, I think it's starting to be proven more and more that students at a younger age are struggling to focus for as long. I mean, I know if I'm going to do any sort of teaching in campus ministry, I really ought to teach for 10 minutes or less, because anytime after 10 minutes, they're losing it and they aren't really paying attention. So that's why I actually do interactive teaching instead of just me talking, because if I talk for more than 10 minutes, they're gone. And really, it's shorter than that,
Well,
you
and
know.
so I have a question to that. So, uh, do you do you think and so there's a lot of science behind all this and just brain study and stuff, but like, I mean, there's like whenever we look at what we do in the classroom, we know that at a certain age you have a certain attention span, and then as you get older, that attention span widens, but it hits a plateau to where you get to an age where your attention span's what it is, right? Like it's sometimes I think, oh, well, you're 30, so your attention span should be much longer. It should be a little longer, but I think there comes an age where like your attention span is where it's at. Even adults, we can't sit for an hour and attend to something. So I wonder too if it's so a couple things. It's kind of twofold. Like I think kids aren't used to being bored and knowing what to do whenever they're bored because they always have something immediate in front of them. And what I love is I love when my girl says, "Dad, I'm bored." I'm like, "Great, figure out how to be bored." Like, like what are you gonna do? And it's not here's a phone or let's turn on the TV. Like, just it's okay to be bored. There's a lot of times going down the road, I was bored whenever we were drive 4 hours to go to the beach or go on vacation or pull in the camper. So I mean, I would entertain myself. I mean, that's you put your hand out the window and you jump the telephone poles, whatever, right? Like I was bored, but you figure out
Yeah,
what to do with
yeah.
that space. And so uh, I start thinking, are their attention spans really shorter, or is it just that they're less compliant? And before, kids really their attention spans were about the same, and I'm just proposing, I haven't looked at anything with this, but were their attention spans really about the same before, but they knew how to sit there and look compliant, and now they're so used to just something being thrown in front of them that they know that if they're bored or they get off task or they're done, well, I start squirming around. Somebody's gonna toss a device in front of me. Um, and so instead of, hey, you're going to sit there and look the part. And I go down this path because been working on this methodology that reading about thinking classrooms and how for the longest time, I think in education, we can run into the space of creating mimickers where kids are just mimicking what we're doing
Mm,
all day long and being super compliant instead of being thinkers.
mm,
And we're trying to shift that mindset here at our school instead of just mimickers and kids that look compliant, look the part, but still don't get it. So I don't know. I know I threw several things
yeah,
in there. So
yeah, yeah.
thoughts?
Um, I, whew. So I'll hit on the mimickers here in a second, but I think that's actually a really interesting thought. In terms of attention span, I'll give my thoughts, but man, I'll start by saying I really
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean, we have done no
I'm,
research on this. We're just like
yeah,
kicking this around a minute. But
yeah, but I do
it's
think,
a different way to think about it, right? Like, has their attention span
yeah, yeah,
really, really, has it shrunk? I mean, we're still creating, but we build habits, we build different things, right? Or is it just we have kids that just aren't quite as compliant because whenever they're bored, we appease them.
Yeah.
We built that habit. Oh, just
I think it's a mix. I mean, because I don't think it's ever fixed your attention span. I think it as you train it, um, you train to be focused on things, you learn to be focused. If you train to not be focused on things, you learn not to be focused. And what social media does, and what yeah, even our devices in general, they're designed to give you a dopamine hit with every ding or every little thing that you're seeing. The algorithm is designed to keep you interested, and I mean, the what seems to be the case with these algorithms, they're actually really fascinating to do things as well as they do it, but they want to keep you stuck within their device. And so I do think there's a reality of our attention spans, or what we consider our attention spans, to have shrunk, where we just expect them to be fed much quicker, if you will. It's just like eating. If you learn to eat every 10 minutes, you're going to start eating every 10 minutes. And I think that's kind of the same idea. Um, so I do think there's a reality to that, but I also think there's a very significant reality to, I mean, kids in general, and that's all age range up to age 36. That's the experience that I have so far. So, kids up to age 36 are master manipulators. Um, and I see this with my kids all the time though, but my oldest will be like, "Oh, I'm so bored," and what he just wants to watch TV. And it's like, dude, we don't do that. So yeah, don't do it very often. And like, I don't know what you're thinking, but that's what he wants, and he's trying to figure out how to make that happen. So I do think there's a reality of we fed it, we've helped feed it too, and it's not that it's a fixed thing, I guess, is what going back to that. Um, but I also think when we came up through college, the way we paid attention was different. Would we still get bored? Was our attention span still pretty short? Yeah, yeah. But when we got bored, we didn't have something just to fix that boredom right away. And so we learned how to be bored. I mean, I can't tell you how many, talks or something I would have sat through, and, I was analyzing the cracks on the wall instead of listening to the talk. I was just finding a different way to be bored. Um, and and I think probably a little bit more healthy of a way to be bored, because you're taking boredom away by scrolling. Um, so I would say that. Now this mimicking idea, I love that thinking, because I think for a long time our education system really has been more focused on teaching us what to think. And this is coming solely from my experience in the education system. But the idea is like, hey, we need to really focus on teaching you what to think. And um, the more and more I've learned uh, in two different areas, the more I've learned about history, but also the more I've learned about scripture, is I don't think we were really designed, I don't think even our education system rose from the Greek idea of education. And but even Greeks, the design of that thinking was to teach you how to think well, was to invite you into that instead of what to think. And sitting from someone in the university perspective, I was talking to the church about this, and I interact with college students all the time and very ingrained within the college world. And I'm surprised that most of their classes, and most of the classes I had in the undergraduate level, were still designed to help us learn what to think instead of learning how to think. And it's a lot easier to educate that way, I think. in terms of our education system, because then you can, figure out how to get an A. When you're trying to teach someone more how to think, then, like um, you have to deal with people with different opinions, and you have to figure out how well they're engaging that opinion. And instead of like, oh, here's just the right answer. And I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about, even at a young age of mimicking is basically, hey, we're going to teach you how to get the right answer, and this is the right answer. And in some ways, you need that, but we're going to show you what to do, you do it. And instead of, this sounds like kind of what you're moving into is a different way of thinking, a different methodology to help integrate the learning how to think. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
and it's probably at this moment, but it's a book by Peter. His last name starts with L. It's really funny last name, so I'll mess it up if I try to say it. But anyways, he talked about thinking classroom. So a lot of times in math, I'll use math for example. We say this is the way. If there's not enough ones in the ones place, you got to borrow from the tens, and so you mark that out and you make this a 10 and carry it over. Well, so we teach that methodology, but kids don't understand why. We
mhm,
teach them how to multiply 2 3-digit numbers, and we teach them to bring the zero down, but they don't understand why we bring the zero down, because now we're multiplying a tens place, so we need a zero to make that, right? We're multiplying now in the hundreds place, so we need 2 zeros to carry that. They don't understand the why, but they just mimic it, and they learn, all right, if I do this process, I'll get the right answer. So then, we have kids that are just doing the process because they do the process. But then whenever you get to dividing, they don't understand how to divide because they don't understand place value, because they don't understand how you multiply that multi-digit number.
mhm,
And so what you did is you got to teach another process. Well, at what point, I believe our brains have a bandwidth, right? That memory can be stored and recalled at faster, so if we teach the place values and actually why we're doing it instead of just do this method, how many methods are they going to be able to remember over time until that storage is just full, and then they start either forget. So I don't know, so just really thinking about how to create thinkers instead of mimickers. And it's been game changing. I have a teacher, couple teachers have started this book study last summer about it. I kind of introduced it to them last year, and a couple of them's really taken off with it, and it's neat to see because it also teaches you like you're gonna fail. Like, so we're
mhm.
gonna give you this problem, and we're gonna ask you to try to solve it, and you got to figure out how to organize all your information and how to get there. And you still may not get there, and that's okay. But then we're gonna work through it with you. So I don't know. It's just so I kind of go back to that too. Like were we better at mimicking than this generation is? I don't know. So I have a lot of different thoughts, and but I guess my goal is to even have kids that are thinkers and not just mimickers, that know why they're doing what they're doing. They know the why behind it.
Mhm.
They can articulate it. Don't just believe it because I told you, but let's talk about why. Let's ask questions. Let's dig into it. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
been neat. It's been really neat to watch because I believe the kids that have gotten this experience in there, and we're doing it with math right now. With the math, I think they're going to be stronger mathematicians
Yeah.
because of it.
Uh,
So
100%. Man, I mean, we do a couple homeschool days with our kids, the way our school's set up with our oldest, who's in kindergarten. We have 3 days where he'll go to school, and then we get 2 homeschool days, where they give us the work and we just work through it with them. And I tell you, um, we sit there all the time, and like, he's learning to read, he's learning math, and he'll sit there and he'll get something wrong, and he'll get mad. Or, he's doing it and you see him get it wrong. And, but I've learned, and I think my wife's learned this as well, is okay, he's got it wrong. I'm not going to do anything and let it keep going. And then we get to the end. It's like, well, what do you think? How do you think you did? You check it over. And you start seeing the process of him, like, being able to see, oh, I got this wrong. okay, now how can I fix it? Because he wants me to tell him right away, like, okay, well, what do I need to do? And then starts getting fussy. And it's like, sorry, man, you got to figure it out. And we know you know this. We know you can do it. You got to figure it out. And that's a little bit of a different example, but it's the same idea of, hey, you're gonna fail. I mean, you're gonna get these things wrong, and it's not about getting it right. Our whole education system, the testing system is set up like, hey, get it right, get it right, get it right. But life is not about always getting it right. It's about learning how to think. Um, and it's about learning how to think through things well. I mean, you and I know this from leading an organization, but anytime you're interacting with people, it's not about getting it right with people. That's often more of a turnoff than anything if you're so focused on getting things right, getting your interactions right. It's about just showing up and learning. It's about showing up being curious. I mean, all these different elements that go into it. Life's not about getting the answer right, because usually there's no the answer. It's about learning how to think and process and think outside the box and expand your thinking. And when you do that, you actually start seeing how life actually ends up being a lot different, ends up being more fun and interactive. And I'm going to digress here, but I just think it's so much we've been told, oh, you've got to get the right answer, got to get the right answer. And you have to have that in math. Like there is a right answer in math.
Yeah.
But learning how to think is going to teach you and take it a lot further. And I wrestle with this with college students. How do I teach college students how to think over what to think? And we talk about that all the time. So, yeah, it's good stuff, man.
Well, we're getting about that
All right.
time. I'm about to go get these kids.
I do too. So I know we always end in such good times,
Yeah.
So
Well,
it was a good conversation.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, have a good
So,
day. Everybody that's listening, thanks for listening. If you got value from this, definitely share it, and you know how to get in touch with us. So,
yep. All right.
all right.
We'll see you later.